Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Lost in Science, and boy is it great to be in your listening device. My name is Chris, and joining me as always I have my stalwart colleagues Claire and Stu. How are you guys?
Yeah, good. More stall than wart, let's just say.
I'm sticking with the wart myself. So
Fantastic. I think either side of that word is not worth breaking up. It doesn't reach. Just stick with the stalwart. Anyway, these wonderful people have some great stories for us to entertain and inform, infotain, if you will, or enterform. Claire, what are you going to enterform with us with today?
Well, this is a enterform, maybe a little bit of enterform. Yeah, I don't know. But Chris, tell me, have you seen in the shops recently, there is, in the large retailers, you might see some clothes that have being labelled as being made with recycled plastic or recycled polyester and recycled cotton.
Look, you probably know that I don't get to many clothing shops.
Maybe you're the wrong person to ask.
I'm aware this. The last exciting thing I saw at the shops was a loaf of a scone loaf, like a whole loaf of scone, and that blew my mind. But recycled plastic clothing.
Yeah, recycled plastic clothing. It's showing up all over the place, and I wanted to know, I guess, how this is being done. Is it a sustainable practice? How do people recycle clothing? What are the processes around it? And there's a great article in the conversation about it recently, so I did a little bit more digging, and I'm going to tell you all about it.
Well, that is amazing, Claire. Not recycling the news, but bringing something new out of bits that she's found elsewhere. So it's
it's the metaphor that won't give up.
It is, exactly. It is just like a simile. Well, I look forward to that. Stu, what have you got for us?
Well, I was reading some news this week and discovering a little bit about the diversity that can be found in sex chromosomes in humans. And I think, anyone who is, a high school graduate and passed biology would probably know that we were taught that people with XX chromosomes are female and people with XY chromosomes are male. Obviously, this is only a fraction of the truth, and I'm going to look into some of the reality of the actual diversity that is there in sex chromosomes in people, and it's interesting stuff. And also, not that many people are aware of the variations that they may possess themselves too.
Fantastic. So there could be some surprises lurking in your 23andMe, or should that be 26andMe, depending on what your particular mix is. No?
I don't think it quite works that way, but yeah, it might. If you get the right tests, you could find out something that you didn't already know. But yeah, I'll talk about why that is and what it means.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. These sounds like some amazing information, enterforming for your mind. On with the show.
I think we're lost.
We're not lost.
Not even any short-range radio signals yet?
Except for a single, very powerful radio emission.
Of course, a transmitter of that sort isn't exactly standard equipment.
Science and technology must be absolutely mind-boggling.
Of course, it's mostly on the theoretical side.
Well, so far.
Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
So, have either of you been to the shops lately? Maybe you've seen items of clothing for sale that claim to be made out of recycled materials, maybe a polar fleece, Not saying that, you two definitely will go to the shops to buy polar fleece or anything, but...
I've heard of this concept, the idea that polar fleeces can be made from milk bottles and stuff.
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
they are plastics, so, a lot of plastics can be recycled into other plastics. I just didn't make the connection that they could be wearable plastics. I mean, it's not derelict.
That's right.
Not derelict from Zoolander where you're wearing actual garbage.
No. They are sort of recycled into material. Sounds pretty good. There, maybe there's a pair of shoes that contain recycled plastics. But where, I don't know. I mean, I've been wondering where these recycled plastics and cottons are coming from, how the process of recycling these materials actually happens. Because, fashion and clothing, it seems to be one of the last industries where materials are efficiently and effectively recycled. Like, we've got a lot of bins out there now, and we've got a lot of processes through e-waste and soft plastic rubbish, and a lot of processes to be able to recycle. But when it comes to our fashion, it's really lagging behind the rest. And, there is a reason for this. And it's because it is quite hard to recycle clothes. They're made of a lot of different things. So I'm going to explain a little bit about that and where we're up to in this process. So first of all, this idea of recycled polyester, and like you're talking about, recycling plastics and also recycling cotton. So brands like H&M and Cotton On, they advertise quite a lot about the fact that they're using these recycled cottons and polyesters. It's pretty consistent, and they lean on it quite heavily, when they're talking about their sustainability cred. But one thing to note here is that, this recycled polyester and, often the cotton, it's not always, it doesn't always come from recycled clothes. So just like Stu said, it's coming from other things, other disposable plastics like water bottles and milk bottles and those types of things. The way that this happens is that recycling, so plastic bottles and, milk bottles are collected for recycling. So the caps are removed, they're sorted by colour. The bottles are cleaned and sterilised, and the plastic is dried, and then it's sort of shredded into these small flakes. So the idea is you need to take it from a bottle and then turn it into like a thread, and then you need to use that thread to weave it to make a fabric. So they're shredded into small flakes, which are then melted, because you can melt plastic, and then they undergo something called extrusion, or sort of like, squeezed and what's the word for it? Sort of threaded, turned into a thread.
Yeah, I mean, extrusion's a pretty common plastic process, but I think I did watch Willy Wonka the other week, and I think they had an extrusion room in that, but it wasn't plastic; it was candy that they were extruding. Yeah,
candy. Oh, yeah.
Isn't it just like stretching? Is that the word you're looking for?
Yeah. Well, stretching and stretching. All right, okay.
I think how it works
nice
is that it gets pulled out of a sort of molten plastic blob.
Yes,
and it gets stretched, and it cools as it stretches, and then it's a thread.
It does.
Yeah.
And I can imagine you can extrude sugar and candy quite easily, and that sounds a lot tastier than extruding plastic. But in this case, we're extruding plastic and turning it into yarn, which is then spun into thread, and then you've got this thread that's then woven into fabric rolls, which you can then use to sew and create new clothes.
Thanks to the magic of the friction between the fibres, as we discussed last week.
Just
a call back there, I want to throw that,
That's right. And make sure you go onto our social medias, because Chris has got a wonderful video of
it's amazing.
Of that experiment taking place in real time. Amazing. Shout out to last week. Anyway, so this sounds like a great way to address the plastic bottle problem and, plastic pollution. However, just to note here, you're not really doing anything about recycling polyester clothes. And polyester clothes make up something like 60% of all clothes sold in fashion around the world. So you might be, recycling polyester, but really you're not making much of a dent in the fast fashion industry, and you're not able to sort of take any of those clothes, any of those sort of polyester clothes, and turn them into anything else. So they still end up in landfill. And another thing to note here is, there's an unknown impact of microplastics, and, how much microplastic from this extrusion method and, leaching out of fabrics from these recycled materials, both in the production of them and during their life cycle, is an area that's currently being researched. So, we understand that some microplastics, every time you wash something polyester, there's a certain number of microplastics that get, cleared into the ocean. So, it's not great either. So there you go, just in terms of recycled plastics. And recycled cotton, on the other hand, it's usually made from manufacturing waste or old cotton clothing. So scraps of material cotton that are broken down and shredded up. However, so, you break down old cotton, you shred it all up. However, when you do this, when you shred it all up, the fibres become shorter through the shredding process. So when you try to sort of like turn them back into a yarn again, these fibres are much lower in quality. So recycled cotton is often, you've got a certain proportion of it that's recycled, but inevitably you have to feed back in what's called virgin cotton, or cotton that, isn't recycled, that comes straight from the plant. Or you need to add something like a polyester back in there to then spin them into, a yarn, something that's going to hold together, so that you can then weave them into new fabrics and then make clothes with them. So if you're putting in a polyester, for example, then you've got a mix of polyester and cotton, and you've got a garment that can't undergo that process of recycling again, because it's mixed with two different things, and you can't undergo the same sort of shredding and recycling that happens like that. So yeah, there's complexity. There's a lot of complexity in this fashion industry and the recycling components. If you think about it, and your favorite jacket, it might have so many different materials. It's got buttons, it's got zippers, and if you want to recycle this garment, you need to dismantle the whole thing. They need to be separated, and that involves labour, and it is expensive. So, at the moment, we're also struggling in recycling terms with dealing with this issue of labour and cost just to deal with recycling. So what ends up happening with a lot of garments is they are often, air quotes, recycled into something called shoddy, which is as it sounds. It's just shredded up clothes, and they're turned into things, other products like low quality insulation and stuff like that. So it's not really recycling. It's just, turning it into a low quality thing.
It's more like repurposing than recycling.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. It's like the time I tried to make a rag rug out of old clothes, and it just didn't go very well. It was a shoddy rug, let me tell you. There are some innovations and technologies in the field, though. There's a company, it's called Blocktex, and it's developing a way to recycle fibres from blended fabrics. So, like I was saying before, you've got polyester and cotton that are blended into the same fabric. This Blocktex company, they can separate the cellulose, which is, the cotton and the linen, from the polyester and the textiles, so they can actually separate them and get started on, taking them through their own sort of recycling process. And then another company called Evernew, I don't know how to pronounce that, Evernew. Oh, Evernew. Oh, I get it now. Evernew. Without an EVRNU has developed a type of lyocell that is a type of material. Has been made entirely from textile and clothing waste. And there's also something called biological recycling. So this is when fiber waste from cotton is composted to become fertilizer for new cotton crops. So that's a great innovation, which seems like a no-brainer for me. But although there's been a lot of these improvements and advances in fashion and clothing recycling is really a long way to go. So certainly next time you go to buy something, whether that be a polar fleece or anything else, just remember there is a lot more evidence and a lot more reason out there for you to reduce the amount of clothing that you're buying and reuse the clothing that you're buying before you recycle the clothing.
Science, the final frontier. These are the voyages of Lost in Science, our ongoing mission to explain strange new words, to seek out new science and new explanations, to boldly go where no radio has gone before. There are often discussions in the media, and especially in social media, about science and sex, where it relates to, gender issues, where some people claim that men is men and women is women and never the twain shall meet, or something along those lines. And I know Claire has talked about the scientific basis of sex markers in humans and in other animals. And how there's not necessarily...
That was a while ago.
It was. It's a deep cut, that one. There's not necessarily a single clear marker of sex based solely on genetics. And the more research gets done in this area, the more diversity is discovered in the population. And this is one of the things where we kind of have to have the tools to be able to find what we're looking for. I don't know if you ever remember watching the movie Evolution, which was a weird David Duchovny sci-fi movie where they discovered this new weird kind of DNA with his community college science lab, where it had 3 strands in the DNA instead of 2 strands. It's basically, you can't find that because we don't have the technology to discover that, even if that was true. So this is a technology thing. And the more advanced our technology gets, the more things we can detect in genetics and other things. So new research into human sex chromosomes has revealed another layer of complexity. And as I mentioned in the intro, anyone who did biology in high school will remember, possibly, that there's a simple idea that women have 2 X chromosomes and men have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. And this is what we're taught, and this is how we know that, men is men and women is women. This is often held up as a simple identifier between the sexes, and the reason men and women develop differently is mostly or partly due to the differences in those chromosomes. But of course, the reality is not that simple, and the almost 8 billion people on Earth are very likely to have a good degree of variation from the mean, which is important to understand from a medical point of view as well. So a recent study of men in the UK found a much higher rate of diversity in sex chromosome characteristics than they expected to find, up to twice as much as they previously estimated. So this study, the rate is much higher than they were looking for. The study was published in Genetics in Medicine on June the 9th. It was called The Detection and Characterization of Male Sex Chromosome Abnormalities in the UK Biobank Study. Clearly, we can see from that title that political correctness has not gone mad at Genetics in Medicine. I would say the differences are perfectly normal for the people they were found in, just different to what they might have assumed they would find. I think maybe using abnormality when you're talking about people's unchangeable genetics is a bit rough for the participants who are all anonymous as well. So I guess that's one benefit for them. But look, it has been recorded before that a small percentage of men in the population actually have variation on the standard XY chromosomes that we were taught about in school. Some men have a combination of XXY and some have a combination of XYY. So they have at least one version of the Y chromosome, just not the XY combination we were taught about. So because sex chromosomes have an important impact on development, that ratio, the difference in the ratio, can also have an impact on development. And where these more rare versions are found, they have found some developmental differences. So people with the XXY combination have been found to accumulate body fat faster than others, for example. They often have been found to have lower testosterone levels and often a higher occurrence of delayed puberty in people with the XXY chromosome combination. People with the XYY apparently grow taller and faster as children and into young adulthood, but other health effects are relatively unknown, mainly due to the fact that nobody's looked into the connections before because they haven't measured the prevalence of these variations properly in the past. So in the current study, the one that was published on June the 9th, out of 207,067 male identifying participants in the study who were aged 40 to 70 years old, 231 had the XXY variation, while 142 had the XYY variation of sex chromosomes. Now,
so like 1 in 1,000 and 1 in 2,000, respectively.
Or one and a half in, or two, 3 in 2,000, I guess maybe would be the right ratio when you're talking about humans. But that seems, it's not a rare thing. I mean, I don't know what the medical definition of rare is, but it seems like we probably have all met someone who falls into that category. But possibly due to the higher prevalence of health-related problems being identified as related to the XXY variation, 23% of those identified in this study already knew they had that variation. So because it's been related and linked to health problems, doctors go looking for it, and when they find it, they tell their patients that, oh, look, you've got this chromosome variation, and that may be causing some of your problems. But in the XYY group, only 0.7% of them knew they had the chromosome variation. So
I wonder if any of them found out through 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and they got their sequences back and found it out.
Well, yeah, it is possible. I'm not exactly sure how the genetic test for the variations would work, because it's not necessarily something they're looking for. They're usually looking for sequences and particular genes and stuff like that. So that may not even show up, whether it's an X or a Y or anything like that. But if you target it, you can obviously find it out. I just thought it was interesting that only 0.7, and this is an issue, or 0.7% of the people who had the XYY, because there doesn't seem to be obvious health problems associated with that variation, except growing taller when you're younger, which, if you're a basketball fan, not a problem. But further research might find more links. The more people, the more people are tested for the variations, the more they might actually find links with other health problems. So maybe people will learn more about it and be aware that they are, part of the diversity. But the reason I was interested in this story, it goes to show there's not really necessarily a simple genetic way to define the sexes. The XY, XX dichotomy is not really a reality. There are also women who have Y chromosomes in addition to their 2 X's as well. There are women who have 3 X's and not just 2. So this sort of stuff, it's not a simple dichotomy of male and female based on genetics, and therefore the argument that sex is completely genetically based is not really a strong argument. And I think the more technology we have, the more research we do into this, the more variation and the more diversity is likely to be found and become apparent in this field of genetic research on humans.
I've noticed that when people kind of spout off on social media about, science says there are only 2 genders, XX and XY, those people are invariably never scientists and are not aware of what the science actually says.
That is true.
And that's it for another episode of Lost in Science. Lost in Science is recorded for 3CR in Melbourne on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and it airs across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the support of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. We would love you to get in touch with us. You can email us at lostinsci@gmail.com, or you can find us on Facebook, we're Lost in Science on 3CR, or on Twitter, where we're at Lost in Science 1. You can find us on your favourite podcast app, where if you get the chance, please give us a good rating and review, as that will raise us up in the search rankings so other people can find the science. Or you can listen to us however you listen to us now, where the same time every week, Claire, Stu and Chris get
Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.